talking about something serious, something that I think deserves to be talked about. It's the fact that my sweet potato is finally growing. My husband is holding our cat looking at us from the window. Move! Today we're going to be talking about houseplant hoarding versus collecting, what hoarding is and what collecting is, and when does one become the other, basically. Before we get started, how could you do that? Are you kidding me? I'm trying to be serious over here. Before we get started, I want to thank Zimpf so much for sponsoring this video. Zimpf is where I get all of my glasses. You'll hear more on them later. One of the most amazing things about the plant community is how you can inspire others into different kinds of plants that they might like, that they might not have seen before. Like, I know that I was inspired to get this plant because I saw a bunch of other people have it. I saw a bunch of other people growing sweet potato vine. So I was like, I want to grow sweet potato vine. Because we have that kind of community in the plant community, it's really easy to get caught up and swept up by what other people like and wanting to bring that into your home for yourself. Unfortunately, what that can look like sometimes is bringing a little too much into your home when you don't either have the space, the money, or the ability to care for these kinds of things. Something I've wondered about since the very beginning of my houseplant collecting journey is, am I just hoarding? Am I really just like, is collecting different than hoarding? Am I hoarding plants because I have all these plants? There was a time where I had over 300 houseplants in my home and I couldn't effectively care for them all, and I was worried that perhaps I was hoarding. I think on the surface, collecting can look like hoarding if you don't understand what the differences are. I definitely did not understand what the differences were until I started researching for this video. So sit back, drink some tea, or have a coffee while I tell you about the differences between collecting and hoarding. I feel really blessed that a lot of you have felt really inspired by my houseplant videos and different plants that you wanted to bring into your home because of me. However, I definitely realized that I have contributed a lot to the consumerist mindset that is like buying, more, like lots of shopping. And it's not until recently that I've really, I think, strived to make a big difference in my content, focusing more on care videos rather than videos about buying and unboxing and unwrapping. I'm gonna include all of my sources in the link in the description. But with that being said, let's just get into it. Hit like and subscribe if you like these types of deep dives and more commentary-like content, and let's get into it. People with hoarding disorder have a persistent difficulty getting rid or parting with possessions due to a need to save items. Attempts to get rid of the items can cause considerable distress, and items collected in the home will disrupt living in spaces. American Psychological Association, 2013. I think the most important thing to start off this video is by saying that hoarding is not collecting. They are two very different things characterized by different elements, which was something that I was not aware of. And I think it's really interesting that people have been able to kind of pick these two things apart. Hoarding is classified as being compulsive, out of control, zero planning. You see something on site and you're triggered to buy it because of the thought of owning it. Collecting is organized, planned and targeted, and intentional. So they are very two different things. In contrast to the organization and display of collecting, disorganized clutter is often a hallmark of hoarding. Something else that I thought was interesting is that hoarding only affects about 2.6% of people, and it also affects men and women at the exact same rate, which I definitely thought for some reason that women would be more likely to hoard because of that whole evolution thing of like, oh, women were the gatherers. And so like, I thought in my head it made kind of more sense that women would be more into like hoarding, but I guess hoarding is not gathering and collecting. Hoarding is different. Hoarding is also characterized as a maladaptive disorder that is a form of obsessive compulsive disorder. Collecting, on the other hand, is when you are bringing things into your home, you are gathering them in order to organize, proudly show and display, and keep neat your targeted collection. It's very clear that people who are hoarding items, they don't take care of their items. It's known as excessive accumulation of items regardless of value. There might not be any rhyme or reason to why a person is hoarding something. So I was curious, okay, how do people develop hoarding disorder? So risk factors that can contribute to a person developing hoarding disorder is brain injury, trauma, developing obsessive compulsive disorder, uncontrollable and unmanageable buying habits, sudden death of a loved one, or sudden eviction or sudden loss of possessions. Hoarding disorder can start as early as 11 to 15 years old, and usually people who do develop hoarding disorder have a temperament of indecisiveness. So my next question was, okay, If hoarding disorder and collecting are two different things, then what is this whole thing with like houseplant hoarding? Because there's definitely a culture of like hoarding houseplants in the community. It's like the more plants you have in your collection, it's almost like the cooler you are. It's like, oh, this person has like 1,000 plants, or this person has 500 plants or 300 plants. And people that don't have the same large collections, they often aren't really regarded as maybe even being as knowledgeable because they don't have a large, just like hoarding of plants, right? So I wanted to answer the question of when does plant collecting become plant hoarding? And so I did some Googling, I did some research, and I found this really wonderful podcast that was done by this lady. Again, it's linked in the description. It's a little podcast episode where this lady interviews someone who specializes in helping people declutter their homes when they struggle with hoarding disorder. One thing that she noted was that people seem to have a houseplant hoarding issue versus just collecting issue when they're buying plants and then not unboxing them or putting them in their homes. Like they'll just buy plants and the boxes will just be on the floor and then the plants will die. Because it's not about them having the plant, it's about them buying the plant and then keeping it even if it dies. She visited a lot of people's homes where they would just have dead plants everywhere, but the people who were having the hoarding issue, they wouldn't throw away the dead plants because, oh, someone gave that to me and I want to remember that they gave that to me. Even though there's literally nothing left in the pot and it's just a pot of soil, and sometimes the plants will be all over the house with no rhyme or reason. There'll be soil everywhere. And this is all stuff that I thought was really interesting because there was a point when I was getting really into like having a lot of plants last year that companies would send me boxes of plants and then I would just like let them sit and I wouldn't open them for sometimes a few days because I didn't really care to open them. I just had them. And then they would die and I wouldn't really do anything with it. I wanted to share a bit of my own experience because actually one of my very close family members does have undiagnosed hoarding disorder. I grew up with them going through my trash because they wanted to make sure I wasn't throwing away things they might want to keep. And even now they have like a storage unit where literally they just put everything that they can't decide if they're gonna throw away or not. And when they do try to go through stuff and throw stuff away, they'll have mental breakdowns about having to let go of some of the stuff. So instead, they have a storage unit that they have to pay monthly for, where they put all of the things so that the clutter from their hoarding isn't in the house, it's away somewhere else. And so that's this very interesting thing with hoarding disorder, is that when I was doing research, lots of these websites says that sometimes it can impede your life and other times people are smart enough about it where they can kind of live with it and find a manageable way to cope while still hoarding. And in this instance, I think that's what my family member is doing, but they always raised me and told me to not be like that. Like, don't be afraid to let stuff go. Don't be afraid to get rid of stuff. And so for me, I have always kind of overcorrected. I can literally throw away anything. It doesn't matter what it is. I can throw it away because I was raised to not want to store and not want to keep things because my family member has been dealing with this issue since they were younger. The psychological health websites that I did some research on said that each decade it will continue to get worse unless you receive treatment. And there is no cure for hoarding disorder, but there are lots of different treatments. And I'm really proud of my family member because they were like aware and they taught me to not do this. During your life, if you are related to someone who has hoarding disorder, you are so much more severely likely to develop that issue, especially later on in life. But because I was kind of prepared my whole life to not do that, I've always been really good at pretty much throwing everything away. Kind of an issue when I started getting into plants because I do have a personality type where I want to collect things. When I was little, I collected Littlest Pet Shops and I had like 300 Littlest Pet Shops, and then I had bows. I would collect my cheerleading bows. I had like, oh my gosh, 30 different cheerleading bows. And then I had all these different lanyards from different track meetings. Every time I'd go to a track competition, I'd buy a new lanyard and put it on my backpack until I had like 40 lanyards hanging off my backpack. Then I wanted to try to get into collecting shoes, but shoes are really expensive, so that never really worked. So I got into collecting mugs, and now it's plants. And so I've always had the personality type of someone who wants to keep a lot of different things, but I'm really grateful that my relative told me to always make sure to not hold on to things and to be willing to let go of things. If I didn't have someone to tell me to do that, I think I would be kind of probably in a different spot. So then the next question I wanted to answer, so what if you hoard plants? Like, is that even bad? Because plants have, you know, they have very positive effects for mental health. And so I'm like, okay, so what if people have like thousands of plants in their house, right? Like, is that even bad? Because plants have a positive effect on your mental health. In the podcast episode that I was listening to where the interviewer was interviewing the hoarding expert like explicitly said that plant collecting becomes hoarding and a problem when you are, one, unable to live in your space and use your house to its normal ability, when you are at a financial loss, you are unable to let go of dead plants because of the memories you have attached to them. There is no organization anymore to your collecting. You are buying plants completely at random. You are putting them in your house even though you have no place for them. And number 5, when it becomes compulsive and you are no longer able to deny yourself the bringing in of any more plants to your home. And this is so interesting to me because plants are so good for your mental health. They're clinically proven to lower your blood pressure and soothe your mood and emotion. Plants are a tactile thing that you can touch, look at, repot, work with, and sometimes even smell because of the fact that they bring you into the present moment. People with anxiety are often stuck living in the future, worrying about what's going to happen to them in the future. Or people with PTSD are stuck in the past and they're worried that what happened to them in the past is going to happen to them again. And what plants do is when you touch, feel, look at, smell, or work with a plant, it's been clinically proven to bring you into the present, which will relieve your symptoms of either anxiety, PTSD, depression, and other things. Houseplants are really important because they engage your senses and bring you into the present, which is what is really, really helpful for people. And it's really kind of sad that plants can also become such a negative thing. I don't know, in the plant community, there's just so much of like, there's always room for more plants. Like, I feel like there's a lot of different memes, jokes, t-shirts, like even if you're in a plant shop and you're like looking at this plant and you're like, oh, I'd love to get this plant. And then the shop clerk's like, well, you can never have too many plants. It's kind of just egging people on. And a lot of people in the plant community do struggle with shopping addictions. And I think there's a lot of people who kind of unknowingly also do struggle with a hoarding disorder because they become so wrapped up in having more and more and more that they stop kind of taking care of pruning, cleaning, and showing off their plants. It becomes just about bringing more things into the home, spending money, and owning something regardless of its value than it is about the type of plant that you're looking for and how you're showing it off. I felt really happy and proud to go through all of those warnings about hoarding disorder and seeing that I am not affected by those things. I take great care of my collection. I display everything in a meaningful way, make sure that I'm repotting things. I recently just let go of like probably 3/4 of my entire collection. Like literally all the plants that I own right now are in this room and I can see every single one of them. I don't have plants shoved in different spaces where I won't be able to find them, where I don't know what I have, where I'm forgetting things. I think the one thing that I was hoarding that I did recently get rid of was my orchid collection. And I also thought this was interesting because in the podcast episode, the hoarding expert talked about the fact that a lot of people will hoard orchids because they just want them to bloom again. And when orchids die, people won't throw them away. And I probably had 50 different orchids that I had in my paludarium before I converted my paludarium into my terrarium. I don't know. Literally like sold the entire collection for $50. And someone was very happy to take all of them. And I kept the 13 orchids that I love a lot, but I literally had those orchids in another room. I never took care of them. I didn't really look at them at all. I didn't water them. I didn't know what I had. And a lot of them were dying and I just had them to have them. So I think it's really easy to kind of like walk the fine line. But if you are someone who feels like after watching this video, you're realizing that okay, maybe I do have an issue with this, I am going to include like a ton of links in the description for you to reach out and get help. Usually people who struggle with hoarding disorder do not know that they have a problem until someone else points that out. One of the most interesting things, and I really encourage you guys to watch this podcast, or I guess listen to this podcast. It was a really, really good podcast, and I think I'm gonna start listening to that show on a regular basis anyways, because it was just really interesting. She said that sometimes people will just have boxes of plants all over their floor. Like there'll be dead plants everywhere, there'll be soil everywhere, there'll be dead leaves everywhere, and people don't want to throw away even dead leaves, they don't want to throw away old pots, they don't want to throw away dead plants, and you can't even walk through their home because there's so much plant there, and people are spending thousands of dollars on these plants that they can't even take care of because it's just compulsive at this point. That being said, I think a lot of people don't struggle with this. Obviously, hoarding disorder only affects 2.6% of all people in all countries and cultures respectively. I also thought that was interesting that it doesn't affect one culture more than another, and it doesn't affect one gender over another. I thought that that was really interesting, that it just kind of seems to target anyone and everyone who's either had a brain trauma or some PTSD or sudden loss of a home or family. That being said, houseplant collecting is super wonderful and it's a great way to engage with others. Maybe if you were worried that perhaps you did have hoarding disorder or that you were a houseplant hoarder, hopefully I've been able to put your fears at rest, that you do not struggle with this. But statistically, there is a chance that some of you do. If you want more resources and ways to find help in your area, I will link a bunch of different stuff in the description for you to check out. But other than that, thank you guys so much for watching this video and being a part of my community. Thank you so much to All the Green Places, Botanicas, and Kim Klinowski for your extra and continued channel support. Let me know in the comment section down below other kinds of deep dives you are curious to hear about, maybe some thoughts and feelings you've had about the plant community that you want to see someone cover. I would love to be that person. And thank you so much finally to Zimph for sponsoring this video. Zimph is where I get all of my cute glasses. Yes, mine are dirty because I actually use my glasses. You can check out the first link in the description to see all of the really cute glasses. These are the Aphrodite pair, the pair that I wear the most all the time, and also the pair that you guys ask about the most. You can use code Ashley at checkout for 50% off of frames and 20% off of lenses. So maybe if you're thinking about trying out a new glasses brand, I highly recommend you try Zimph out. Not only does it help out the channel a ton every time you use my code, but also you can sometimes get up to 3 pairs for under $100 total at checkout when you use my code. And they're so durable. I used to use Calvin Klein, but now I use these. And so many of my members and even my family members have switched to Zimph. So check them out. You can see the sun is out. I'm getting some Zimph sunglasses here soon because I'm ready for the spring and summer, you guys. Anyways, thank you so much, Zimph, for sponsoring this video. Thank you guys for watching this video. Don't forget to check out those links in the description, and I'll see you guys in the next houseplant section where maybe we'll talk about other hard-hitting topics. I have a whole playlist for PlanTEA. You're welcome to take a look at it in the description. Also, let me know some history topics you're curious about hearing about. I want to cover the orchid craze and also the tulip fever, a bunch of other different houseplant history stuff. We haven't made a HPH episode in a minute, so let me know historical topics you're interested in hearing about. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next houseplant section on the internet. Goodbye.